Judica County is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law, your law firm for life.
Welcome back into Judica County Radio. Your hosts are Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They're practicing attorneys here in North Carolina, and offices located in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, Gastonia, and in Morehead City. We got a real treat. We got attorneys from different areas of Whitaker and Hamer's practice joining us on the program today. Josh, who do we have up first?
Up first is going to be one of our associates, attorney Taylor Scruggs-Smith. She spends most of her professional life dealing with what we would call family law matters: divorce, separation, prenuptial agreements, custody. And today in our conversation with Taylor, we focused on separation. You know, what is separation in North Carolina? A lot of states don't have that provision in their divorce proceedings. So we talked about separation, what you can negotiate to keep private, what becomes public information and when. But again, staying on this theme of how you can plan to keep things more personal, more private with your attorney. So that's where we took this conversation.
As always, we're answering listener questions, questions that our listeners have written in about or asked us in person, or clients that we deal with. And Taylor is one of our family law attorneys here at the law firm of Whitaker and Hamer, and she joins us often to answer family law questions. And so the question that I get a bunch, Taylor, we in North Carolina, we're very lucky. Our economy does very well. We have people moving in from all across the country, a lot of people from New York, a lot of people from California, Texas. People are moving here from states where if you decide that you and your spouse are going to get separated, separation is not as big of a deal as it is in North Carolina, because in North Carolina, obviously, you're required to be separated for a certain amount of time before you can get your divorce judgment or your divorce entered. And a lot of people, this is a foreign concept. This having to be separated for a year doesn't jive with the way it was where they came from. So that's what I want to talk to you about. And so first, just tell me a little bit about the separation period. What is it? Why is it there? That's the first question.
All right. So separation is essentially the time that you and your spouse are living. The statute specifically calls it living separate and apart. So one of the things I get asked all the time is, okay, does that mean I can live in the apartment that's in the garage, or the apartment in the basement, and he stays in the main house, or in the master bedroom? You can't do that. You have to actually be living separate and apart. If you guys still hold the same address, the court's not going to think that you guys are separated, or that you were separated for the whole time. I usually tell people, you guys need to have separate addresses. You need to have a bank account in your own name. Like, if mail gets delivered to you, it shouldn't be something he can pick up. Things like that, because the court is very particular about you have to be living separate and apart. So this separation period, I think the court was pretty heavy on, well, not the court, but legislator was really heavy on trying to make people think through, did they actually want to get divorced, and giving them enough time to potentially let cooler heads prevail and settle issues of finances before you ever got to the time that you could file. During the separation period, you can file for alimony, equitable distribution, things like that. You just can't file for divorce until you've been separated for a year and a day. If you go to court, you always hear an attorney say a year and a day, because you can't sign your paperwork on that exact year anniversary. Us attorneys will try to push you back a couple of days, because judges will kick it out if it's on the exact anniversary.
Well, that's so the separation period ends up being a big deal, because a lot of folks, especially in the economy here over the past couple of years, actually separating and creating two households is a big time expense. And, you know, a lot of folks are in a situation where, you know, paying the bills in like a shared household was a struggle. And if you're looking at separating and creating two households to be separate for that year period, certainly it's tough on a lot of folks and a lot of potential clients. But there's not a lot of workarounds, it doesn't sound like.
No, there's not a lot of workarounds. I get asked often, well, if this is going on, can't that get sped up? Or if there's a DVPO, can I not have to wait a year? Or if there's an affair, can I not have to wait a year? There's no workaround for that year-long separation. It doesn't matter what's going on. I have to, as an attorney, wait a year for you to be separated until I can file your divorce. What you end up seeing happen is that if finances are a struggle, and you see people where finances are a huge struggle already, so trying to split into two different households is astronomical. But one thing you do is you see some people who try to negotiate some type of agreement while they're still living together, because you can say this is going to be our anticipated separation date, which is the date whoever somebody moves out, but go ahead and start figuring out the finances and how, you may decide to split the house or retirement accounts, things like that. Sometimes you see people move in with family for a couple of months until they can, just so they're out the house and they can at least start the separation period. Because the longer you're in your house, the longer the separation period. And the date of separation is not important just for how long you got to wait to get divorced. Date of separation can determine, what values we're looking at in terms of property and your retirement accounts and things like that.
So the separation period is important in North Carolina, but the date that you start the separation is also important. So assuming that you can separate, like assuming you can afford to do it, and you guys have two different addresses, and you create two separate households, from that start date, there's going to be a year that goes by before you can get to the divorce, before you can get to alimony, before you can get to that kind of stuff. But in the interim, what can you do? We always talk about on the show, attorneys, we try to plan so that you don't have to have a lot of information out in the public, right? You can settle what you can settle, whether it's family law or estate administration or estate probate. Take care of the things you can take care of without having to go to court, without having to have a file open downtown at the clerk's office.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you can agree to once you're separated? So after separation, before divorce.
After separation, before divorce, there's a lot of things you can agree to. You can actually file for alimony, equitable distribution, child custody, and child support as soon as your date of separation starts. You don't have to wait till you've been separated for a year to file for those claims. And I think that's a common misconception, is people think they have to wait a year to file for alimony. But the things that you can handle in a separation agreement are those same concepts. You can put in child custody into a separation agreement. You can put in child support. You can put in any type of alimony or post-separation support. You can put in equitable distribution, which is usually referring to how you're splitting retirement accounts, personal property like the couches and the kitchen cookware, the house itself. All that can go into a separation agreement, but let's say you can't get all of that into a separation agreement because you can't agree to everything. Okay, take out the few parts you can't agree to and settle everything else, so that you at least have some progress on the situation and not every issue is held out to be resolved. But yeah, there's a lot you can do in a separation agreement. The big thing is always, when it comes to the kids, you can have an agreement. The court's still going to have jurisdiction in terms of if somebody wants to file for child custody later. As long as the kids are under 18, they can still take it before the court, even if you have an agreement that says this is how we're going to do custody. And that's just because best interest of the child. Court always wants to be able to protect kids.
So short of child custody, you can really deal, again, a lot of times this time of separation is it's very emotional period, right? So you're not always dealing with folks who, obviously there's been something that's happened where you can no longer cohabitate, and you might not get along the best, but assuming there is a will to get things done, sounds like you really negotiate a lot of stuff, even though you're not divorced yet, kind of right out of the gate, right at that separation date.
Correct. So you can actually negotiate a lot of stuff, and in a certain sense, the court encourages you to negotiate. For instance, when you file for equitable distribution, at some point, the court expects that you're either going to mediation or you're filing something saying why you don't think mediation will work. But the court encourages mediation. So they're not going to come tear up your deal because they don't like it. You say that there's been a deal outside of court, court's moving on.
Yeah.
So they're only going to focus on the issues that are brought before them. So I typically tell people, like, if you can get something settled, go ahead, because you're going to be more willing to go through with something that you had a hand in making versus something a judge told you you had to do.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we're doing our planning with our clients, and again, this could be civil litigation, estate planning, estate administration, family law. Part of our planning process is, what can we handle privately, right? That doesn't have to be in a court file down at the courthouse, that a clerk, like I said, a judge's order, a judge, you never know. We think what we know judges are inclined to do, but we can never predict what a judge will or won't do or won't put in an order, or there's just some unpredictability there. And especially me living in the business law sphere so much, is I want to be able to handle and take care of everything that I can take care of. It doesn't always work in that sphere either, but good. I think that's a good answer. I get asked that all the time about the separation period in North Carolina, because some people just feel like they should be able to get divorced in a week, and maybe they should be able to. Maybe there's an argument that North Carolina, we've outlived the usefulness of the separation period, but until the legislature changes it.
That's where we are. Yeah, and I get asked that all the time too. People trying to find workaround ways, and there's no workaround.
Yeah,
the whole year and a day. That's it. That's all I can do.
All right, Taylor. Well, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
And that's Taylor Scruggs-Smith, a fellow attorney at Whitaker and Hamer, joining Josh Whitaker. And again, family law, the focus. We're going to continue with more discussion coming up on the other side. Who's up next, Josh?
Morgan, up next is attorney Ashley Penner, who is going to speak to us a little bit about estate planning and trust.
There you go. And coming up, we just want to remind you, too, if you've got a legal situation you're facing, you can always get in touch with Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm, the power behind this program. Their phone number is 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call is about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And you can always email your questions to the show. We'll answer them on a future broadcast. info@judicacounty.com. That's right. More Judica County coming up on the other side.